The last section of your notes is really about common things like climate, vegetation. There's a little bit about Eastern Europe. We're going to spend some time on Eastern Europe next class because there's so many issues involved in Eastern Europe right now. We've already covered Russia. Here's some pictures of Russia, the permafrost, some interesting ways to get around in Siberia, not necessarily common to those of us who live here. Okay. Talked a little bit about the prison camps that they used to have in Siberia. They're called gulags. There's a picture of Lake Baikal in Siberia, the deepest lake in the world. 20% of the world's fresh water is located here. Trans-Siberian Railroad map. Here's a little bit of picture from a portion of this Trans-Siberian Railroad. Climate. Again, we talked a little bit at the beginning, the fact that Europe's latitude is so much higher in most places than places in the United States, but because of some unique wind currents, ocean currents, mountain barriers, they have really different types of climates. They have a little bit of polar climates, a little bit of marine west coast, as you can see the green color. Humid continental is predominantly the climate type that they have. That's the blue, and the Mediterranean is the white portion at the bottom. Obviously, if you're looking at the top that's white, it's kind of more of a tan. Norway, Sweden, and Finland do not have a Mediterranean climate. Okay. In your notes, the next question asks you what effect do ocean currents have on much of Europe? And that is that they keep climate mild by bringing warm air and water from the tropics. And you see a picture here of the Gulf Stream and the North Atlantic Drift. Which ocean current warms most of Europe? Again, that answer is in your notes. It is the Gulf Stream or the North Atlantic Drift. Average annual precipitation varies widely throughout Europe, as you can see by this map. The darker the green, the more rainfall they receive. Vegetation in Europe, some natural regions. They have some forested areas. They have Mediterranean climates that have chaparral, low-lying grasslands. They have tundra. Again, a picture of the northern European plain. Talking a little bit more about the fact that it's an invasion route into Asia, or maybe Asia will invade finally Europe. Next thing in your notes asks you to name some crops that are grown commonly in Europe. There are 4 of them. Grapes are grown commonly in Europe. Probably most of you know that they use the grapes to make wine in a lot of cases. Olives. Olive oil comes from this region in droves. Wheat is another very common product, usually grown on the northern European plain. And finally, barley, also grown on the northern European plain. In fact, Germany, that's kind of one of the reasons that they are so famous for their beer, because they use barley and hops in their beer. Okay, the steppes. These are in Russia. It's kind of going back a little bit since this is the European part of Russia. On the steppes, there is a lot of agriculture. On the steppes, they grow 25% of Russia's food. You're seeing a map that shows you where Chernozem is. Germany's Black Forest. This is kind of one of the sadder things about Germany and Europe. It's a beautiful region. It's known for its cuckoo clocks, which you see here. Some of you may have seen it where the birds pop out and they sing the tune. Unfortunately for them, because of their industrialization, acid rain has gotten a lot of the Black Forest, and you'll see that in a minute. Mixed forests used to cover much of Europe. This is your next question in your notes, but now this is a problem due to the cutting of trees for centuries. First of all, it was for shipbuilding. Then it was used during the Industrial Revolution to fuel their plants. Now all their trees, they've pretty much gotten rid of almost everything that they had in terms before. So deforestation is your problem in Europe. Okay? Picture of the tundra, the land beneath the Arctic Circle. You can see all the animals that thrive in the tundra region. I don't want to go there because there's 2 right there that I don't really want to see anytime in my lifetime. I've seen a bear up close and personal one time too many in Reynosa, New Mexico, where my family lives, and I definitely don't want to see an Arctic wolf. Just a little bit about land use. Arable land is the light green. You can see they've got a ton of arable land where crops are grown very easily. Grazing land is the yellow, so a lot of places near the Russian borders, that's where the cattle grazing is common. Woodland areas, notice most of it's still in Norway, Sweden, Finland. A little bit of a portion in Russia. Agricultural activity, you're seeing a map that shows you what they grow in each region. So you see a lot of potatoes, a lot of barley, a lot of wheat, a lot of oats. Obviously, Ireland at one point grew a lot of potatoes. We're going to talk a little bit about next class about the Irish potato famine and what happened when they ran out of potatoes. Natural resources. Anything on here that you see is a natural resource thing that they make a lot of money from. So a lot of aerospace, engineering, chemicals, petroleum, specifically here in the North Sea. Iron and steel, very common. Manufacturing, these dots that are on the map, those are manufacturing places. Major ports, obviously, since they're surrounded by the ocean, there are a lot of major ports. Motor vehicles, very commonly made in Germany, some places in Italy. These are high-end motor vehicles usually. A navigable waterway is something that is shown in blue, meaning a boat can get easily up and down it. They're famous for their shipbuilding. Sometimes those things don't work out very well, if you remember the story of the Titanic. Okay. Textiles, cloths, linens, they're famous, especially in Italy and Paris, for their clothing, their high-end clothing. And finally, wood and paper, as you can see these trees to the north. So they have a lot of natural resources. But if you notice, they're very limited to certain countries, so they have to share or they won't have the resources that they need. So that was one of the reasons why they created the European Union. Okay, you see petroleum and natural gas in the North Sea, major coal deposits. They have a lot of coal just like we do. Okay, Europe has vast mineral resources. This is in your notes on the back page. Two of these things have enabled steel production. Just like the United States, steel was a major factor in the development of Europe because it allowed them to start building buildings that went higher up and got taller and taller and were very sturdy so that they could use their land more efficiently. Those two things that Europe has a lot of are coal and iron ore. Those two things that you're used to make steel. Okay? One of the last two things in your notes, what's been the negative impact of industrialization in Europe? Remember they industrialized several years before we did. They were the first countries to have the industrial revolutions hit them, and so their factories were pumping out things into their atmosphere at rapid rates. Okay? Negative impact of industrialization, you'll see in a minute. A lot of things, problems with acid rain, air pollution, water pollution. Most of the rivers in Europe are very highly polluted. Hey, last one, what's a major source of petroleum? That North Sea is where they get a lot of their petroleum. We talked a little bit about in Russia, and this map shows you very well where the oil is located in the Caspian Sea and why some people are so anxious to get their hands and make it a lake instead of a sea. As you can see, Azerbaijan has a land share of most of the oil. The other countries would like their fair share, or they think there's their fair share. Okay, some geographic problems. Going back a little bit, what is the effects of industrialization? Here's one of them. This is what happens to a forest when acid rain gets to it over time. Okay, they've had massive environmental disasters and pollution problems. Obviously, you realize the Chernobyl plant blew most of the radiation north and to the west into Europe. Those dots that are dark are sites of major oil spills. Okay, major chemical spills or explosions are the red dots. Severely polluted areas are outlined in red. The greatest occurrence of places where forests are dying is outlined in green, so you can see all this area here. Highest concentration of acid rain is in Germany and Poland. Greatest radioactive contamination of seas. Notice the UK off their coast is terrible, and so is Ireland. The worst pollution of the seas, again, because of the oil industry that's in the North Sea. Look at this. You see this. The Mediterranean is just covered with pollution. Okay, and then the first is lead and cadmium poisoning, or the last is lead and cadmium poisoning. This kind of stuff right here. Lead oftentimes results in mental deficiencies. Okay, acid rain. You can see both Europe and us have been highly affected by acid rain as a result of our industrialization. Notice the new spot popping up on the map in Asia where those factories are in China. Imagine the effects of acid rain on people. If this is what it does to statues over time. Notice that the statue, the hands have started to erode, the facial features are gone. He almost looks like he's hurting, screaming as a result of acid rain. Unfortunately, one of the neatest cities in the world is Venice. all the canals that connect Venice, the gondolas. Unfortunately for Venice, just like the rest of Europe, they are dealing with water pollution. And unfortunately for them, it's eating away. Originally, the city of Venice was built on wood pilings. Probably not the best decision to put wood pilings underneath the buildings to hold them up in the water. So they started to eat away at the buildings in a road. Buildings started collapsing, caving in. If you've seen the movie, one of the James Bond movies, at the end of the scene, he's trying to rescue the girl that's inside one of the buildings in Venice, and the building is literally falling around him. They're trying to change all the stuff in Venice and shore it up with concrete. Unfortunately for them, they've already lost a lot of places that were of historical importance. It's not uncommon to see scenes like this in Venice either, where it floods. You'd have to walk around, if you can even get around, with water everywhere. Demographics. This is one of the big topics in Europe, and we've kind of talked about it throughout the year. They are shrinking population. They have negative growth in Europe. In most European countries, they're shrinking. It causes them a problem. One of the problems has been that they started bringing people in to work in their factories from foreign countries. A lot of those people are coming from the Middle East and Africa. Different religions are starting to clash throughout Europe. A lot of times it's not reported on the news, but Muslim and Christians across Europe, there have been riots over the last several years in several locations. It's kind of what population distribution looks like. The darker the green, the more people there are. Countries that are dark green, which you only see one, actually are experiencing positive growth. That's Albania. Countries that are kind of the reddish color are experiencing slow growth. Okay? Countries that are yellow are pretty much stable. Countries that are green, the light green, countries like Sweden, Germany, Czech Republic, they're experiencing 0 to negative growth. And the countries that are blue are having the most issues with population shrinking. Hey, you're going to find out this next class, this right here, when you see all these languages that come together, this is a large reason why these Balkan states keep splitting apart. In fact, this map is not even correct. There's new countries. Yugoslavia is no longer in existence. It's Serbia. Montenegro is split apart. There's a new country of Kosovo. So it's constant. Okay? You can also tell by this the religions in Europe, for the most part, it's Christian, but there has been an influx, as you kind of see in the East, of Islam from the Middle East, and that's caused some issues. And that's Europe, at least for physical geography for today. All these words, arrivederci, goodbye, au revoir, adios. See you next time.